Douglas R. Conant is an internationally renowned business leader, New York Times bestselling author, keynote speaker, and social media influencer with over 40 years of leadership experience at world-class global companies. For the past 20 years of his leadership journey, he has honed his leadership craft at the most senior levels, first as president of the Nabisco Foods Company, then as CEO of Cambell Soup Company, and finally as chairman of Avon Products. In 2011, he founded Conant Leadership, a mission-driven community of leaders and learners who are championing leadership that works in the 21st century. Today, continuing his legacy as a champion of leadership that works, Doug, among his other commitments, also serves as chairman of CECP, chairman of the Higher Ambition Leadership Institute in Boston, and is a retired member of the board of directors at Amerisource Bergen. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to Doug.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be with you all here today, virtually. Today I'm visiting with you from the snowy confines of Western Michigan. It sounds like I have a little better weather than you do in Pittsburgh, but hopefully we're all going to be warm and into a good conversation over the course of the next hour and a half or so. The topic we have is leadership that works with honor in a challenging world. And to talk about that, I'm going to share with you lessons from the Blueprint, which is my latest book, launched in March 5th of this past year. The Blueprint, Lifting Your Leadership to New Heights. And we're excited to be with you. And we are moving on to the next slide, please, Mara. I have a favorite quote from Tolstoy, Anna Karenina. Happiness is not about outward things. It's about how you choose to view them. If we go to the next slide, I think about that when I think of leadership, and leadership is not about outward things. It's about how you choose to approach them. Let me elaborate a little bit. Moving on to the next slide. Our goal today is to help you choose a path to leadership that works with honor. And it has to work, you have to perform, but what I'm here to tell you today and going forward is, in my opinion, you have to pursue that work in an honorable fashion, and we're going to talk about that. As you do that, think in terms of developing a platform for leadership that's highly authentic, powerfully effective, fulfilling for you and the people with whom you work, and geared to delivering high performance. Embracing the genius of the end and doing all four of those things simultaneously. Next slide. Let's talk about what is leadership that works with honor. The answer, leadership that works with honor is all about the art and science of influencing people in a specific direction. That's leadership. It's driven by behavior derived from one's core beliefs. Oftentimes, and I would argue it should be driven by reflection and study, as well as experience. It's built on a high trust, high performance platform of honesty and transparency with all stakeholders. If you want to have an enduring proposition, we'll get into that in the comments, I think, later. It's consistently modeled by doing what one says one is going to do. And it's committed to doing a little bit better tomorrow than you did today. It's committed to continuous improvement. Next slide. Now, how does the concept of honor connect with this concept of leadership? Here's the way I think about it. The simple definition of honor is really twofold. It's to regard with respect all people and to fulfill an obligation. From a leadership perspective, to me, it's about honoring oneself, honoring one's colleagues, acknowledging that there are many stakeholders as part of your enterprise, and honoring their interests, honoring your commitments to those people, acknowledging and honoring the situation and circumstances you face. And by the way, if that's not enough, you have to honor the past and reflect and learn from the past. You have to honor the present, meet the expectations of the present, and you have to honor the future by setting the table for a more prosperous future. Piece of cake, right? Next slide. Actually, it's not. It's a very heavy lift. And we'll go to the next slide. And so you ask yourself, well, how do you get on the path to leadership that works with honor? And how do you do it in a way that can work in the middle of your cockamamie life as a leader? The answer, I would say, is the blueprint. And to that end, I'm going to take you through elements of the blueprint that'll stimulate our conversation later on and help you think about how you can lift your leadership to new heights in a way that works uniquely well for you. So let's move to the next slide, please, Mara. And excuse me, Mara, 1 second, thanks. Mara is my aide de camp here. What I'm showing you now is I'm going to show you the trailer for the book, The Blueprint, which sort of sets the stage for what I encountered and why I ended up writing this book. So enjoy. It takes about a little over a minute.
In the world at large, a blueprint is a tool for bringing to life the dreams of an architect.
Wrong video. We're clicking here. It's supposed to be on the trailer, Mara. Okay, we're going to just keep moving then. Let me explain what happened. In the, I had just relocated to Boston with my wife. I was director of marketing at Parker Brothers Toys and Games on the North Shore of Boston. I thought I had moved to heaven. Actually, my family was the founding family of Salem, Massachusetts, and I would drive past the statue of one of my ancestors every day on the way to work. And who wouldn't love being director of marketing for Parker Brothers Toys and Games? We were the most popular family on the block. We had been there for 3 years, and I had been promoted. And as director of marketing, I was having a great run. We had doubled the size of the company, but we were struggling to keep it going. So one day I went into work. As I drove into work, it was a beautiful day. I was in the best of spirits. I went in through the front door, and the receptionist there said, "Doug, the senior vice president of marketing would like to see you. Could you go up to his office, please?" So I went up to his office. He looked a little anxious. I walked into the office, and he said, "Doug, your job has been eliminated. You need to clean out your desk and be out of here by noon." And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I was devastated. I was blown away. I was incredibly bitter. I had no idea this was coming. The company was struggling a bit to keep it going, but it had a tremendously adverse effect on my mindset and ultimately on my career in the moment. As I dealt with it, I had been working for the parent company in this company for almost a decade, and I quite frankly felt betrayed. I went from there to, I went home to tell my wife, my 2 small children, and to face my very large mortgage, feeling incredibly frustrated. I had a call when I got home from the head of human resources, and he said, "Doug, Larry was so anxious to get you out of the office, he forgot to tell you all your benefits," at which point I swore at him and slammed the phone down. About 2 hours later, after listening to my 2 little kids running around and the dog and the 2 cats and all the chaos there, I thought to myself, I better call him back. I've got to get a job. I cannot be here. So I called him back, and he said, "Doug, I'm going to give you a lot of information, but the most important thing is you call this outplacement counselor, and you need to call him right now, and he will help you get on with your job search." So I did that. And at that point, now I'd like to introduce you to Neil Mckenna, who's probably there. Here's Neil, my good friend Neil. Neil was a tough son of a gun. I called him up, and he answered the phone, as he always did. We didn't have caller ID. We didn't have any other voice. There were no cell phones. And he would always answer the phone and say, "Hello, this is Neil Mckenna. How can I help?" And so Neil was there to help me. And I said, "Well, it's late in the afternoon. I'd like to make an appointment to come see you." He said, "Come right now, drive over here, and we're going to talk this through right away." So I got over there about 4 o'clock, and I was there for 3 hours with him. He made the time for me. And boy, did I need it. I needed somebody who was there for me and there for me completely, and Neil was the guy. That having been said, Neil was a tough son of a gun, and he wouldn't accept any poor me mentality at all. And now I'm going to read from you about a page of my book, The Blueprint, and it'll describe Neil and describe the process I went through, which is something I would commend to you. Neil was a gruff, straight shooter with a hearty New England temperament. He didn't suffer whining BS or victim-y, poor me attitude. Not for a second. I could tell he cared about me and genuinely wanted to help. But he was a tough guy, which is why I was surprised when in our second meeting, Neil asked me to handwrite my life story and share it with him. That seemed like a strangely intimate request from such a grisly man, but he insisted. He didn't care how long it took. He wanted every detail I could remember. I was dubious, but I was desperate to find a job, and he said this could help. So I got cracking on the task of cobbling together my autobiography. Before this assignment from Neil, I had never taken the time to think carefully about my life experiences. Most people, including most of you in the audience, haven't. It felt uncomfortable, but I took it seriously. I wrote about growing up in the suburbs of Chicago with my 3 younger brothers, my unrelenting competitive drive as a tennis player, the values of service, grit, and industriousness my family had instilled in me, the forthright nature I admired in my mother, the unconditional love and support of my wife and children, the inspiring role models we had in both our families, my admiration of Teddy Roosevelt, my love of Louis L'Amour Western stories, my passion for learning about exceptional people in sports and public life, and on and on and on. Everything and anything I could think of, I included. Then I handed it off to Neil, confused that anybody would ever be interested in reading such an account. 2 weeks later, Neil had read the entire document cover to cover, and he had drawn some harsh conclusions. Bluntly, he told me that one of the main reasons I wasn't living up to my potential was that I was lying to people. I wasn't telling them who I really was. I looked at what you wrote down, he said, and it just doesn't match up. I bristled at the accusation at first. I said, I'm not a liar, Neil. Gesturing at the pages I'd written, he explained, look, the person who wrote this life story is a fierce do-or-die competitor. It's the opposite of the face you're presenting to your colleagues. What you're showing to the world is a modest guy who goes with the flow. But the Doug who wrote this story is a leader and a fighter. Incredulous, he said. The person who wrote this life story and the person you're showing to the world, these are 2 completely different people. Everything started to click. I wasn't forging connections with people 10 years into my career because they were never really meeting the real me. I've been hiding without even realizing. Why? Because I had no foundation in my true self. I'd never done the self-exploration necessary to connect with what makes me, me. And like so many leaders today, I had never been exposed to a usable process for getting to the bottom of it. That was an amazing experience I went through. It was 50 pages handwritten, small handwriting. I then went on to the next slide, if you could, Mara. And a few years later, I ran into this fellow. His name is Jim Mead. Jim is the best executive search person I've ever worked with. Together, he and I have recruited and hired over 40 people who have gone on to be CEOs somewhere else. This guy gets it, and he knows how to run a search better than anybody I've ever encountered, and I've worked with everybody. You say, well, what's his secret? What's the secret sauce? Well, I'll tell you the first thing he does. He writes the person's life story down. He interviews them, and I went through this process when I was recruited by him for someone else. And he goes into every nook and cranny. He writes the entire leadership journey down, your life journey down. And that's what guides all the rest of the work. Because he believed, like Neil believed, and like I've come to believe, that your life story is your leadership story. And we're going to talk more about that. Let's go on to the next slide, please, Mary. My friend Warren Bennis, who sadly passed away a few years ago, has a great quote. Becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's precisely that simple. and it is also that difficult. I have another favorite quote that plays in this territory. We can move on to Brene Brown. Brene says, you can either walk inside your story and own it, or you can stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness every day. To be honest, I was not walking inside my story when I started my career. I was an oldest child. I was walking inside my parents' story for me, my teacher's story for me, my coach's story for me, my boss's story for me, and I was hustling for my worthiness every day. And it took me losing my job and being challenged to really reflect on what mattered most to get into the fabric of what I really wanted to do. And that's the process that laid the groundwork for us to move into the writing of the blueprint. Move on, next. You see, you have a choice. You can either walk in your shoes or you can walk in the shoes of all the people that have expectations of you. I would say, I would highly recommend, I would pick your shoes, but then I would say you need to honor all those other expectations too, and we'll talk about that. Next slide. I've written 2 books on this subject. The first book was Touch Points, became a New York Times bestseller. It was all about building a strong foundation and then realizing that our lives are made up of small interactions, and we had to be incredibly fluent in those small interactions in order to get the work done. Most of us are in 100 different interactions a day, and that defines our legacy of contribution. It's not some big paper we wrote or some speech we gave that is the epiphany that carries us forward. It's in how we show up every day. As we worked in that territory, we discovered that people hadn't worked hard enough to build their foundation with the blueprint. And so in the blueprint, we help them build their foundation so they can be very fluent in those smaller moments. That's what the blueprint's all about. Next slide. I'll take you through a quick case for action here, which should be obvious to all of you. Next slide. The first point I would make is, look, it's a VUCA world out there. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This phrase was, the VUCA phrase was actually coined by Warren Bennis back in 1987. He was looking in the 80s at a world that was incredibly volatile. What would he say now? Today, it's a VUCA world on steroids. We have a pandemic. It was challenging anyway. Now we have a pandemic, economic uncertainty, social unrest, and political rancor, the likes of which I haven't seen in my 69 years of life. So this is serious stuff. It's a tough world out there. Let's go on to the next slide. The people that work for and with you are swamped, and they're trying to figure it out amidst all this uncertainty. They have emails, they have text messages, they have things crossing the transom. Right when they think they've figured it out, something's coming out of left field or right field or straight down the middle. They are swamped and they need help and they need leadership. They need inspired leadership. They need clear leadership. Next slide. The interesting thing is they all hunger to do better. They just need your leadership to help them do better. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people in the last decade since I've been focused on this completely. And I'm telling you, they all want to do better. It's just a question of creating the conditions so they can excel. Next slide. And I'm also here to tell you that there are no obvious solutions, which is why we wrote the blueprint. You can't go back and spend $150,000 and get an MBA and take 2 years off of your life. You have families to raise, you have work to do. Most of the literature that fills this space of leadership is written by people who have never done it. They've studied it, they have a lot of value to add, but they've never walked a mile in your shoes. I'm telling you, I've walked 1,000 miles in your shoes. And so I'm trying to bring forward a more practical solution. And that's what the blueprint's all about. That should be on the next slide with a little luck, Mara. And well, lo and behold, it is. What we bring forward with the blueprint is leadership that works because you have to perform, but you have to perform, I believe, with honor. It's anchored in the concept of honoring people. It's designed from a been there, done that perspective. Have to show up every day for work for 40 years. I did it. I ground it out. I started at the very bottom of the ladder. I worked my way up through executive ranks to being a president, CEO, and chairman, and being on boards. I've been there. It's built to fit a lot leaders' cockamamie life. Who has time to work on this? We're all swamped. When do you do it? It's also designed to be deeply personal and highly practical. We bring a continuous improvement mindset to the approach, and it's time tested. We've been working on this for over a decade. Next slide. There are 6 practical steps that we want to share with you now. And this is the video that we just almost, hopefully, Mara, this is the video we were showing them before. I hope we don't have the 2 videos mixed up. So you're okay. So let's run this 3-minute video that describes the blueprint process.
In the world at large, a blueprint is a tool for bringing to life the dreams of an architect. Our blueprint process is a tool designed to bring to life the dreams of leaders. Architects and engineers know that the trick to building a skyscraper is laying a deep and solid foundation. The same thing is true about leadership. Your foundation is what you create, and the blueprint is how you create it. Our 6-step process is designed to help build that foundation so that a leader can move forward with much more confidence than they have today. The first step is to envision your leadership future, to reach high and set an anchoring intention for your journey. It's important to not limit yourself in this step. You have much more capacity than even you realize. There's intentional leadership, which is setting the tone and starting to chart the course with your best intentions for leadership. Ultimately, the importance of this step is that it will clarify your purpose in leadership. Step 2 is all about reflection and digging into your personal life experiences. In the blueprint, our core belief is that your life story is your leadership story. Whenever I talk to a leader, they inevitably tell me a story about someone who had a profound influence on them and how they carried that experience forward. And all we're trying to do in this step is help you reflect them in your leadership as you move forward. In step 3, study, lay the groundwork. You will go beyond the 4 walls of your personal experience and study the world around you in a way that will give you further insight into your leadership journey. We encourage you to learn from the people around you and incorporate those learnings into your life. It's all about doing your homework and building a network. Leadership does not need to be a lonely pursuit. In step 4, you get to conceive your plan for leadership. A leadership model is a representation of a system composed of concepts and practices which you use to help people, including yourself, understand your personal approach to leadership. You need to create a model that speaks uniquely to your situation, your circumstance, your aspirations, and your intentions. In step 5, we help you develop habits and practices to bring your leadership model to life in the real world. Ultimately, you'll begin to create a practice treasury, a stable of behaviors that will help you to more precisely bring your brand of leadership to life. So the key is to identify small actionable steps that nest in your very busy life and can lead you to higher ground as a leader. Finally, step 6 of the blueprint process is all about improvement and continually learning from what you did right and what you could have done better, reinforcing the strength of your foundation in perpetuity. It's not the pursuit of perfection that we're after. It's a high degree of iteration based on your own life experiences as you go through your model time and again and refine it. The urgent question is, how can I do a little bit better tomorrow than I did today?
In a nutshell, that's the blueprint process. We teach it in 2 days in our in our blueprint boot camp, and then you can take it, apply it, and lift your leadership to new heights almost immediately. The key challenge in the blueprint is that we encourage you to go from what I would call seat of the pants leadership to more intentional leadership. Look, every day we have to deal with things that come at us, and most of the time we operate from the seat of our pants. But what we encourage people to do is become a little more intentional around the things that matter to them. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute, but the overarching theme is we've got to migrate from doing 100% of things by the seat of our pants to maybe 70% of our things by the seat of our pants, and 30% intentionally focusing on the high leverage activities that matter most to us and the people around us. Go to the next slide, Mara. This is actually our blueprint process as is presented in the book. We have 6 stages, 6 steps. Stairway to heaven, guys. And we have 6 questions that we ask, 1 question around each step. And this is the process. I'm not going to elaborate on it, but what I'm going to show you is I'm a big believer in beginning with the end in mind. So I'm going to show you a short video of a father and a son, father driving the son to school, and you're going to observe this interaction, and then we're going to talk about it through the lens of the blueprint process. So let's go to the video, Mayor.
All right, we're starting our day off, Mom, with our pledge. You ready, Joshua?
Yes.
Let's go.
Today is going to be a good day.
Today is going to be a good day.
I thank God for waking me up today.
I thank God for waking me up today. I'm going to school so I can learn, go to college, and be the leader that God has created me to be.
I'll be
Today.
I'll be taught.
I'll be educated.
I'll be educated.
I'll be educated.
By my teachers.
Empowered.
Empowered. By my teachers.
By my teachers. With the tools. With the tools. To be successful. Within.
And throughout the country.
My community.
Within my community and throughout the country.
Within my community and throughout the country.
I apply myself daily.
I apply myself daily.
I study.
I study. And I ask questions when I don't understand. When I'm confronted with a problem. Or conflict. I think before I react.
I ignore all negative influences.
I ignore all negative influences.
In the classroom.
And throughout the school day. When I'm confronted with a problem. Or a conflict. I think before I react. I ignore all negative influences. In the classroom and throughout my school day. I'm extremely proud to be the next generation of Christian leaders. I accept responsibility.
You didn't let me say the whole thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I accept responsibility and love the challenge.
I accept responsibility and I love the challenge. Let's go. You ready?
Yeah. Peace.
Game time. Start your day off with something positive, man. Our kids can learn. It's our job to teach them. Let's go.
I love that video. I've watched it more than once. And if you think about it, that husband, that father and his bride have thought about what their bold dream is for their son. They've reflected on the life experiences and they've shaped that in terms of a pledge based on reflection and study. They have a plan. Their plan is to create this pledge, and then their practice is that he recites it every day on the way to school with his father. And I guarantee you that those parents are always thinking about how can we make this a little bit better. Now, in terms of their son will never forget this experience. This pledge will be built into his DNA. The parents can feel good that they've helped their child in a way that's manageable for them. The dad's on his way to work. He's just dropping off his son. He's not taking him off for a long weekend to contemplate the world and his role in it. They've created this pledge. It's a manageable proposition, and it fits into the middle of that mother and father's cockamamie life and into their son's life. And he's having a profound influence on that child. See, I believe you can find practices like this that bring your highest aspirations to life. and that can nest in the middle of your cockamamie life. And that's what this work with the blueprint is all about. Go to the next slide, please. There are 5 key themes I'm going to just touch on today, and I'll go pretty quickly through these. The 5 themes are the pursuit of authenticity, the importance of developing leadership competence, cultivating what we call an entourage of excellence. 4, building your own leadership model that speaks to what you want to do. And 5, living and leading with integrity. Let's touch on the first one, the pursuit of authenticity. Next slide. Next slide, please. I'm going to use a clip from a movie. I don't know how many of you have seen this movie. It's called The Legend of Bagger Vance. And it stars some pretty amazing people, including Will Smith, Matt Damon, and Charlize Theron. In this story, it's a mythological story set in 1916 about a depressed World War I veteran, Matt Damon, who finds his authentic self during, of all things, a golf tournament, thanks to his spiritual guide acting as its caddy, and that's Will Smith. Now, in his life, early in his life, Matt Damon had been a prodigy, a golf prodigy in the South, and had been exceptionally good, someone that was admired by all of his peers. But then he went off to World War I, and he came home with PTSD and was lost. And Will Smith helps him find his way. He gets drawn into this match, of all things, with Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen and Matt Damon, and has to find himself as he goes through this golf tournament. We're going to show you one scene from this tournament where Bagger and the caddy are walking the golf course the night before the tournament to get a feel for the lay of the land. And they're going to talk about finding your authentic swing. So we'll go to the video, please.
Longer, a little shorter.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good. 1 stride equals a yard. I'm going over to the tee and start counting.
Top golfers always try to get a leg up in the competition by having the men they trusted most sneak onto the course at night and do their own measurements. So Bagger and I walked the course that night, measuring away. Bagger never wrote down a number. He filed it all in his head.
It went a little harder. Go on, do that again. Yeah, but right here is where this game is won. On the green. First, you got to see it. The sun gonna be there in the morning. Over there in the afternoon. Funny thing is, the blades of grass gonna follow the sun. The green is gonna shift. Same putt. Gonna go one way in the morning, the other in the afternoon. One way in the morning, the other in the afternoon. You see that? Yeah, golf course put folk through quite a punishment. It lives and breathes just like us.
You think Junior can win?
Yeah, if he can find his authentic swing.
Authentic?
Go on, hit one more for me. Yep, inside each and every one of us is one true authentic swing. Something we was born with. Something that's ours and ours alone. Something can't be taught to you or learned. Something that got to be remembered. Over time, the world can rob us of that swing and get buried inside us under all our wouldas and couldas and shouldas. Some folk even forget what their swing was like. Some folk even forget what their swing was like. You keep swinging.
But I don't have any balls.
Don't worry about hitting the ball the way it's gonna go. Just swing the club, feel the club. Close your eyes.
Closing.
You can't make that ball go in that hole. You got to let it. I want you to picture the club moving off your feel the weight of the club. Sailing on the perfect line, dropping out that high, soft as butter. Listen to the sounds of the night. Just keep swinging that club too. Gotta breathe inside me. I see every one of us is one true, authentic swing. Just keep swinging that club too. Authentic swing, part of the whole thing. Something we was born with. Get right. That's a good thing. To the sounds of the night.
I don't feel a thing.
Just keep swinging that club till you're part of the whole thing. That's a good thing. Can you see it? All right, time to go.
Wow.
See, every leader I've worked with has their own authentic swing that addresses their needs. And if you can't understand your source of authenticity, it's hard for you to walk inside of your story and own it. Ultimately, you end up standing outside of your story and hustling for your worthiness with all the people around you. And we help you unlock your sense of authenticity. There's no epiphany moment, but there is an opportunity to dig deeper and better understand what's important to you. The next thing we talk about is developing leadership competence. And I'm not going to get into this in great detail, just going to touch on it. Next slide. There are three pieces to it. I've written on it. It's in the book, The Blueprint, but you can also read blogs on it at Conant Leadership website. I think there are three elements of leadership competence. You need IQ, EQ, and what I call FQ. IQ is the ability to process information and think clearly with discipline quickly. EQ is the ability to develop and manage relationships well, so that while you recognize that virtually all your work is done through others, and they need to be connected to the work in a way that works for them and you. So we talk about IQ and EQ. FQ is all about your functional intelligence, which is if you want to be a CFO, you've got to have financial intelligence. And you also need to understand your sector in which you compete. So it's your function and your sector. If you have IQ, EQ, and you can relate to people well, you manage people well, and you have good functional excellence, you've got the capacity to lift your leadership profile to new heights. If we go to the next slide, we actually have a quiz that's available at the Conant Leadership website for free that you can take, you can have your teams take, where you take it and you evaluate your IQ, EQ, and FQ, and you have a chance to find gaps and lift your competence to new heights. Next slide, please. The third thing is the concept of cultivating an entourage of excellence. When we showed you step 3, we talked about the power of study. We talked about you could learn from others. And I believe the next slide is our Warren Buffett slide. And Warren Buffett, a guy who leads with honor, by the way, would say, much of what you become in life depends on whom you choose to admire and copy. And we believe it's important to look at your life and who do you learn from? Who are the people you admire most? I would guarantee you a couple of things. One is they're going to have very high standards for you. And two is they will also have been very supportive of you. They are tough-minded on standards and tender-hearted with you. And I think that is part of the formula for success in the 21st century. Not compromising on standards, but also demonstrating that you care about that person in a profound way. I'm sure that whoever you think of, when you think of the people who have had a profound influence on you in your life, they were tough-minded on standards and they were tender-hearted with people. We have a much more articulate definition of this, which we're going to run the video now. which is Maya Angelou, and she talks about rainbows in her clouds. And this is also in the same territory that we're discussing right now.
There's an African-American song, 19th century, which is so great. It says, when it looked like the sun wasn't gonna shine anymore, God put a rainbow in the clouds. Imagine. And I've had so many rainbows in my clouds. I had a lot of clouds, but I have had so many rainbows. And one of the things I do when I step up on a stage, when I stand up to translate, when I go to teach my classes, when I go to direct a movie, I bring everyone who has ever been kind to me with me. Black, white, Asian, Spanish speaking, Native American, gay, straight, everybody. I say, come with me. I'm going on the stage. Come with me, I need you now. Long dead, you see? So I don't ever feel I have no help. I've had rainbows in my clouds. And the thing to do, it seems to me, is to prepare yourself so that you can be a rainbow in somebody else's cloud. Somebody who may not look like you, may not call God the same name you call God, if they call God at all, you see? And may not eat the same dishes prepared the way you do, may not dance your dances or speak your language, but be a blessing to somebody. That's what I think.
This is a very powerful idea. And what we're going to show you now is, these are some of the people these are some of the rainbows in my clouds. This is part of my entourage of excellence. In the upper left-hand corner is my wife's grandfather, R.T. Johnstone, had a profound influence on me the last 10 years of his life. I'm a big fan of Mother Teresa because in the corporate world, everybody says we can't get this done because we have no money. Well, she had no money and she had more moral authority than anyone else on the planet. You'd be amazed at what you can do, even if you don't have the financial resources to get them done. Stephen Covey has been a mentor and a friend. Maya Angelou, her work, my favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt. Jim Collins, I worked with right when he published Good to Great, and it guided my work trying to bring about a renaissance at Cambell Soup Company. Brene Brown. In the center of my universe is my wife, Lee Conant, and she keeps me grounded and is the most important person. Warren Bennis is a friend and mentor. Neil Mckenna was my outplacement counselor, Meta Norgard, a co-author and a teacher with me. Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet about introverts. And then my mother, who was a handful 24/7. So by the time I went into the corporate world, I could deal with anybody because I dealt with her. So these are people I learned from who had high standards for me, but I knew they cared. And I think you ought to be thinking about who's important in my life and what can I learn from them. If we go to the next slide, when we get into the Q&A, I'll be interested to hear, before you ask your question, what leader had a profound influence on you? And just share that with us. Take 30, 60 seconds and share who that was and how they impacted you. I guarantee you there is a lot of fertile ground in there to influence how you choose to handle other people. Next slide. I'm going to talk about building your own leadership model. We talk about it in the video on the blueprint. Next slide. This is actually my flywheel. This is my Conant leadership model, and it has 8 elements. I'm not going to present them all to you now, but the axle, the 3 at the heart of the model are 3 things that speak to me. They may not speak to you, but I can deal with any leadership challenge through this model, which speaks to me and is authentic to who I am and who I'm trying to become. At the heart of my model and my axle are 3 key thoughts. The first one is it's all about honoring people. It's hard to expect them to honor your agenda unless you visibly and viscerally are communicating that you intend to honor them. Next ring of the circle is all about inspiring trust. Stephen M. R. Covey wrote a whole book about this, The Speed of Trust. And the tagline is the world's greatest tagline. It's the one thing that changes everything. And if you build a high trust model that honors people, and you have a clear higher purpose, something that you're shooting for that resonates with people, I find you can do just about anything. From there, you then create direction, align the organization, build vitality, execute with excellence, and you always have a results-oriented model that is designed to produce extraordinary results. That helps the flywheel get going. And I've run 2 companies for a sizable period of time, both at Nabisco and Campbell, covers 20 years of my career. And I'm here to tell you, you can drive high performance, best in class, world-class performance, and you can do it in a highly engaging way that honors people. I spent 20 years doing this. I know it can be done. And this model works for me, but this is my model. And what we encourage each of you to do with the blueprint is build your own model that's based on your reflection, your study, your ambitions. And then as you build that model, you live into it and you align it with the expectations of all the people with whom you work. You're more of yourself and you're walking inside your story, not someone else's. Okay, I think I'm down to my last key theme point. I tell one story and then we're into the conversation. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is about living and leading with integrity. All of this is just fine. It sounds good, but you got to show up every day and you got to deal with things. If we go to the next slide, when I took over Campbell, which was in dire straits and lost half our market value in 1 year, the employee, everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Headquartered in the poorest, most dangerous city of the United States, Camden, New Jersey. Half our market value, our series of layoffs. We've gone from a high of over 40,000 people down to 20,000. And there'd been a revolving door for CEOs. I was the 3rd one in less than 2 years. And the company was under investigation for fraudulent behavior. And all the other companies we competed with, all the other food companies were well-heeled cash machines and they were eating our lunch. That was the challenge we went into. I had come off a great run at Nabisco where we really shot the lights out. We were the best performing food company in the world there. And I had been president and I was given this opportunity. My first global leadership meeting, first meeting I had with my top 350 leaders, Marriott Hotel on the Delaware River, right across the river from Camden, New Jersey. And I was going to make an impact. I had started January 8th. Our global meeting, bringing leaders from all over the world in, was held in April. So I'd been there for 3 months. I'd met a lot of the people that worked domestically, but half our business was overseas and over half of our employee leaders were overseas. So this was my first opportunity to get to know all these leaders in one place. I had invited in 2 speakers to speak in the morning of the first day. And then I was planning at the end of the conference to share a pledge with all my leaders, 10 points I was committed to honoring my leadership pledge to them. I was declaring myself, and my first point was, we're going to treat you with respect and dignity. I had hand signed 350 copies of this. It was slated to be given to each person at the end of the conference, and I was going to commit to living by that. Well, in the first morning of the first day, my 2 guest speakers, who I hadn't prepared adequately, my fault, appeared to be disrespectful of our employees. One in terms of being disrespectful towards women, and another one appearing to be disrespectful in terms of diversity and inclusion. And here I am about to showcase my new pledge. First time I've ever met all these people. And I'm going to talk about treating them with respect and dignity. It was a train wreck. And we got to lunch and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Well, the last point on my pledge, my 10-item pledge, which I'll show you now, I think we can go to the pledge, the last point was, if we fall short of a commitment, we will openly and honestly acknowledge our shortcomings and conscientiously work to remedy the situation. Well, I had screwed up the first meeting with my global leadership team. First time I've ever been a CEO, arguably didn't know my ass from my elbow. And here I am screwing up in the first meeting. Train wreck. Well, at lunchtime, I thought there's only one way to take this, and it's head on. And so at lunch, I stood up and I said, we have an unfortunate chain of events here. Two prior speakers unintentionally but clearly disrespected many people that work within our company. And it's not the way we're going to run this company. And so I handed out the pledge and I said, already on day one, I've screwed up. And, but if you'll notice item 10 on that pledge, this is my escape clause. I'm prepared. I'm going to fall short at times, but I'm here to tell you, I'm going to remedy those situations swiftly and honestly, and we're going to move on. And so in that moment, which was, I can't begin to describe how embarrassing it was. As it turned out, I earned the credibility of all those leaders because I owned the problem. I acknowledged it. I pledged I would remedy it. And we did better from there on out. We screwed up in other ways, but I owned those too, and we moved on. We tried to live by this pledge. This pledge, it was known by everybody in the company, was under glass at my desk right next to where I worked. And it was there with me for my whole time at Campbell. It's still in my office today in Philadelphia. So I lived by this pledge. I declared what I was going to do. When we screwed up, I owned it and we moved on. That's the kind of integrity I think you've got to bring, because people are going to see you falling short. If you don't own it, you're going to lose credibility and ultimately lose respect. And then you're lost as a leader. So that's the fifth point I want to make. Now, I think we're in the home stretch. I've just got a closing slide and we're going to get into conversation. We have a half an hour to talk. If I had any thoughts to share with you, all in service to driving high performance and being tough-minded on standards and tender-hearted with people, I would encourage you to lead with honor. Honor yourself, your colleagues, and all the people you're on this journey with. Be the best version of yourself you can imagine. Never stop learning, never stop growing, and never stop helping and contributing to people in your enterprise, your community, and your family. On that note, I think the next slide says, let's talk. So let's talk. We'd like to get some points in on chat. As we get those in, I wanna be really clear about this. I'm talking about this is not about holding hands and singing Kumbaya. This is about performance. As a leader, you have to perform and you can't do it alone. You have to bring people with you. So this is about performance and delivering exceptional performance. At the same time, it's about honoring the situation and the people you're on the journey with. It's not either or, it's both. You have to perform, and I'm telling you, you're well served if you honor the people along the way. That's my point of view. That's my leadership model. I'm happy to talk about any thoughts you may have. And so I think I'm turning it over to Brett now, or somebody. Somebody's going to start asking me questions while I get a drink of water.
Well, Doug, I'm still waiting for some questions to come in from the audience. I should have some coming in soon. So please, anyone that has a question, feel free to type it into the chat and or the Q&A, and I'll pass it along.
While you're thinking about it, I will tell you, you do have to be tough. There's no doubt about it. We let go 300 of the top 350 leaders at Campbell as we went through this transition. And it was hard. It was hard. It's the most significant change, transformational change in terms of leadership that I've seen in consumer packaged goods or industry at large. It was a daunting change process, but we knew if we didn't have leaders who could walk the talk and were tough-minded on standards and cared about our folks, we wouldn't have the credibility we needed to get the other 19,650 people on the same page with us. So you do, when you declare yourself and you commit to this kind of leadership, you've got to be prepared to walk the talk. So.
Here, I'll start off, Doug. We have a question from Jeffrey Yoder. He says, or asks, do you have any suggestions for learning from others in today's more remote working conditions?
Yes. There's actually a ton of really good stuff going on of people studying how you can be more effective in the virtual world of work. So I would encourage you to go to that, to actually do some, just Google effective leadership in the virtual world. And there are a ton of wonderful examples of people leading effectively. I would say what it demands of a leader is there has to be more clarity about what's expected. And given the turbulent times we're in, you have to be a little flexible on what's expected, but you got to be clear. And then what we encourage people to do in this virtual world is make sure people feel connected, and that if at any time they have a question or a comment, that you are available to help them address it. It's about being a helpful leader as well as a demanding one, because there's so much uncertainty and anxiety out there right now. We also have found that that leaders who are finding ways to create room for people to connect virtually, whether it's a Friday afternoon, let's celebrate the week. Thank God it's Friday. Take a half an hour, everybody gets on, and we talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness outside of work. And we get everybody together. And so we create connections in the virtual world that are outside of the work, sort of to recreate the water cooler conversations that go on otherwise. We also have people looking for ways to validate contributions of significance. They're finding ways to encourage colleagues to celebrate contributions of each other with various things via email and instant messengers. And they're also having more frequent staff meetings. If they were doing them once every month, they're doing them once every 2 weeks. If they were doing them once every 2 weeks, they're doing them once every week. And they're short, they're buttoned up, and they have an agenda. And typically those agenda invites everybody before you get into the work in the first 5 minutes to comment on something that's gone on in their day that connects them personally to the group as opposed to the work. Those are little tips that I've picked up from the people I talk to who are actually dealing with this every day right now with their work groups.
Okay, Doug. Next up, I have Abity, who has a question. And I believe I unmuted her. Abity, can you chime in?
Oh, you have to talk. Come on, you can do this. Abity, that's an interesting name.
Thank you. Am I unmuted successfully now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Doug. So my question is, obviously, step one is looking in the mirror and implementing these things in yourself. And then as a next step, do you have any techniques that you could share with us for how you seek these leadership virtues in others? So as you build a high performance leadership team around you as CEO, what do you use to determine who else, brings these virtues of being tough on standards and tenderhearted on people?
Well, I have at a 30,000 foot level, I look for three things. And this has served me incredibly well over the years. I look for people of high character. And when we explore their candidacy, I really want to look under the covers and see how they've developed character throughout their life with that life story that we talk about. So I talk about character. The second thing I talk about is competence. They have to be a person of good character, but they also have to know what they're doing. And they have to have evidenced that they are highly competent in their field or in their chosen field in a variety of other work situations when you're recruiting a senior leader. So it's character, competence. And the third thing I look for is chemistry. And that is their ability, the teams they've worked with and on have to believe that those teams, they have to feel as if they were better off for that person having been there, that they actually created synergy and value for others. So my three hurdles are character, competence, and chemistry. That was my model. And then I was working with someone from the US Army, and they brought to my attention the US Army Field Manual, which has a slogan on it, which says, be, know, do. Now, the US Army has studied leadership longer in the United States than any other enterprise. And their motto is, be a person of good character, know what you're doing, and do it well with others, which is basically character, competence, and chemistry. So that's where I start. And embedded in that is this common sense, common set of values, which say we value people of high character who perform and work well together. So we're always looking for people who have high character, high competence, and are anxious to be part of a high performance team. Those are the three things. And when you interview people, you can actually explore the nooks and crannies of those three territories in a lot of depth. And I highly commend it to you.
All right, next is from Brian Stewart. He asks, have you had any influence by the work Bill George did in True North?
Funny you should mention it. Bill George and I are very good friends. I reference him in my book, The Blueprint. I actually had him come and talk to Campbell when he first retired from Medtronic. Bill and I are singing from the same song sheet. He talks about authentic leadership and True North. And I think we find a way to deliver on that even more effectively through the Blueprint in a way that can fit into a leader's cockamamie life. But Bill George is, he's that kind of leader who is high character, high competence, and incredibly effective with others. And this whole authentic leadership notion, he's the father of it in this generation. He's the one who has preached it and can lead you to higher ground. He followed that model, but he didn't stumble upon it. If you talk to him, he didn't stumble upon it until later in his life when he realized something was missing. He was this hard-driving executive who was pursuing all the attributes of all the, the higher salary, the bonus, the better car, the parking spot, the recognition. And he talks about that. He was in pursuit of that, but it wasn't really working for him because it wasn't as fulfilling as it could be, because he was not showing up in his fullness, in his full self, as his authentic self. As he started to grow into that, he found that he was able to take his leadership to new heights. And at Medtronic, he just shot the lights out for a decade, creating enormous value there and setting it on a trajectory that the two following CEOs have built upon, and still doing well. So Bill George is another person I would recommend. I would put him, he's actually in my entourage. I didn't have him on the slide you saw. If I were you, if you're interested in what I'm talking about, study him.
Okay, next, there's a question from Patrick Cousins. He asked, how do you go about honoring people while you are telling them their career at the company is over? It must be a tough balance.
No kidding. Yeah. This work is not for the faint of heart. This is why you have leaders, but you have to do it in a way that in my opinion, honors people. in the case of at Campbell, and I wasn't perfect on this, but I was pretty damn good at it. We gave people a lot of advance notice. We said, here are the expectations in terms of not only what you are expected to do and to deliver, but how you're expected to do it. We talked about the what and the how, and the what were your management objectives, the how were your leadership traits, and we had a Campbell leadership model that that said what true north looked like, stealing Bill George language, a model of what true north looked like for the Cambell Soup Company. And we expected you to deliver those results and do it in a way that honored people. And if you were having trouble with that, we were going to have a conversation. And we went through a vetting process that went 3 years, where it was declared in year 1. Everybody knew they were supposed to be lifting their contribution profile and improving their effectiveness at leading people with honor. And by year 3, if they hadn't done it, it was not hard for me to have a conversation that says, you know, we're still on the same journey and this isn't working. We're either going to have to help you find a place within the company where you can contribute as an individual, or we're going to do our best to help you find a place outside of the company where you can flourish and prosper and continue to advance your career, but it won't be here. So I think the important thing is you've got to be out in front of this. You've got to be clear about what the expectations are. You've got to manage it carefully so that by the time you have that difficult conversation, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Now, every once in a while, you have surprises. You want to minimize those, but they do happen, and you have to manage them delicately. But there are, I mean, I'm not perfect on this. I've screwed up more than one of them. So, but on balance, get in front of it, be clear, and then it's okay. And by the way, the tough calls we made, I'll go back to it. There were 300 people that turned over those 3 years. Many of them chose to because they saw where we were going and they chose to exit because it wasn't going to work for them. But we had 20,000 people there we had to take care of, not just the 300 leaders. And all I know is every year we measured employee engagement. And every year employee engagement got better as we were holding these leaders to higher standards. As it turned out, everybody in the company knew we had to make these changes. They were just waiting to see if the CEO had the guts to do it. And for the life of me, I just could not see how that original leadership team was going to be, unless they changed, was going to be able to lead us to higher ground as a company. And I had a lot of stakeholders there beyond the 300 leaders that left. I had another 19,000 employees. I had shareholders. I had suppliers. I had customers. We had a lot of people whose needs we had to meet. And that's what we were focused on.
All right. Next, we have a question from Beth Bershock. Beth, I believe you're unmuted and you can ask Doug directly.
Great. Doug, my question is about dealing with other leaders in the company. And in some companies, in particular, professional service firms, leaders, there's not so much of a hierarchy as you all are in similar positions. And so my question is, how do you hold other leaders in your company accountable?
It's harder. And it's, you know, that when I started, it was more, the corporate world was more of a hierarchy. And it was based on the military models from World War II and the Korean War. And now organizations have flattened and much more collaboration is required, and it gets messy. It gets very messy. And all I can, I mean, and so the first thing is to acknowledge that it's messy. The second thing is to be crystal clear about what your expectations are with people. And I have found that if I'm clear about my expectations and I'm clear about what their expectations are of me, and it is clear to them that I'm honoring their expectations of me to the best of my ability, in the fullness of time, I find that most of the folks will honor my expectations of them. it's not a perfect world and it's very messy, but I try and lead by example. If I want you, if I have expectations of you, the first thing I'm going to try and do is find out what are your expectations of me and how can I help meet them. And if I can, I'm going to talk to you about it until we get it right. At the same time, I'm going to be sharing with you that I need your help too. And this is what I think I need. How can we make this work? And some people won't give you the time of day, but all I can say is most people will lead by example and take the high road. Ultimately, I'm here to tell you the high road is the only road. Just ask our former president. The high road is the only road here, and there's no easy way. It's messy. Life is messy, but we have to be really well anchored in what we stand for and how we want to approach things, and then we have to be really clear with people, probably more clear than ever before, about how we're trying to honor our relationship with them, and trust that in the fullness of time, we're going to inspire them to be better at honoring our expectations of them. Not easy, tough. It's a heavy lift. But if you don't do it, I don't know what the choice is, because you can't win otherwise. Or you can go to work for yourself.
Thank you, Doug. That's helpful.
All right, Doug. Next, I have a question from Jake. As a relatively new leader in the business world, where have you seen the most success early in an individual's career, and what is the biggest area of focus that isn't often thought of with newer leaders?
Well, you know what happens? We lose sight of the people. We start focusing on the tasks, and we have our to-do list. And as a leader, you got to remember that you can't get anything done without people, and the people have to have their heads and hearts in the game, because oftentimes they have to represent you when you're not in the room. So I say pay attention to the people. The more you pay attention to the people as well as the tasks, the more they'll pay attention to their tasks and they'll honor you. So don't forget the people. It is so easy to get caught up in the to-do list, and I've done it. But ultimately, it's the people that are working for you and with you that have to help you lift the load. And they've got to believe that you're paying attention to them if you want them to pay attention to taking care of the tasks. Early leaders get so caught up. First-time leaders or junior leaders get so caught up in delivering on the to-do list or the objectives that they tend to lose sight of the people. The other thing as a senior leader, I learned was the importance of leading by listening, and listen to the people around you who probably know more about things than you do. And we encourage people to lead by listening. You can learn a lot. When Jim Collins wrote Good to Great, he talked about level 5 leaders. And these are the people that really led companies to higher ground in an enduring way over 2 decades, actually. And the two things he found they all had in common. First of all, he'd never heard of any of them, and he was shocked by that. But then as he looked under the covers, he found they had 2 traits in common. The first one was humility. And what they realized was all of us is better than any one of us. And so I'm going to learn from all of you, and that will enable us to make the best imaginable decision. So they had humility, and they were always listening and learning. The second thing he saw they had was, while they had humility, they also had fierce resolve to move the enterprise forward. And that was also unmistakable. So they were listening, and they had fierce resolve to move the enterprise forward, to move the group forward, the team forward. And people grabbed onto that, the people that worked for them. They saw somebody that was listening and somebody that was determined to work with them to take the hill. So I would say, take a lesson from Jim Collins, bring humility and a fierce resolve to the work, lead by listening, and you'll be fine. It's all about the people. Leadership is all about the people. As a CEO, all of a sudden you realize you're not doing anything, but everybody that works for you is doing everything. And so you've got to be confident that they're representing you and the enterprise well when you're not in the room, which is 99 out of 100 times. So pay attention to the people, and they'll pay attention to the agenda. I'm getting off my soapbox on that one, but that's what I think.
All right, next, Doug, we have a question from Bob.
Doug,
Bob,
what was one of the most defining moments during your career that you thought really exemplified your leadership style?
Oh gosh. When I was recruited, I'm just picking one. I don't know that it's great, but it was forthright. It was honest. I was being recruited to come be the CEO at Campbell, and they brought me to a restaurant in New York, a small Italian restaurant. I wish I knew, I don't remember what it was called, but anyway, and I met with like 8 directors at one time, and they just were shooting questions at me. I felt like I was in front of a firing squad. I was there for 3 hours, and I thought this was a disaster. I just couldn't finish answering one question before I had another one. I did not feel good about it. I thought, well, I'll chalk that up to experience. Well, I got a call back a few days later from the executive search person. They said, well, that went great. They want to do it again. And I'm thinking, holy shit, I got to go through this again. And I thought, no, I can do better than this. So I got a few friends of mine together. We poured through all the publicly available materials on Campbell. And I actually created a Campbell revitalization framework. And I talked about what I would do if I ran Campbell. And I also included my values and how I worked most effectively in order to lead to a high performance outcome. So I went to the meeting carrying a little bag with 10 copies of this piece with me, my Campbell revitalization framework. And they started shooting questions at me again. And it was like, wait a minute, guys. I thought about the 200 questions you asked me last time, and I have a point of view. I'd like to share it with you. Would you mind if I shared this? So I handed out my PowerPoint presentation, and I went through it. And I said, this is my assessment of your situation. This is my assessment of what needs to be done. And here's how I would do it. And if this, and my approach, I'm going to use shorthand here, is that I'm going to be very tough-minded on standards, but I am very tender-hearted with people. I believe in the power of doing both of those things. It's the genius of the end. I don't believe we can create an enduring proposition any other way. And then I said to them, and if you don't agree with how I would approach it, you shouldn't hire me. You just shouldn't hire me. I don't need it. I'll be fine. Don't hire me. This is the way that I believe this needs to be done. And by the way, I believe it can be done. And I was right. But it was the first time in my career where I'm with people of authority. This is, you know, I'm 49 years old at the time. And this is the pinnacle of my career I'm dealing with. But I found myself saying, you know, if you don't want to do it this way, then this is not right for me. So this needs to be a win-win or no deal, and I'm fine with that. And in hindsight, I'm proud of myself for stepping up and leading in that way. And there are lots of other examples. That little example I shared with you about that first leadership meeting with all of our folks at the Marriott on the Delaware River across from Camden, that was another seminal moment where I sort of declared myself and I just put it out there. And going back to Brene Brown's quote, you can either walk inside your story and own it. At this point, I was walking inside my story and I was owning it. And those were moments I remember. It took me a while to get there. It took me all the way till I got to Nabisco. And if you're ever interested in wanting to know more about me, there are 2 things on our website. There are a lot on our website at Conant Leadership, but one is a story that Stephen Covey wrote about me in his book, Living the 7 Habits. It's about my tour of duty at Nabisco, which was trying, and if you read it, it's maybe 15 pages. It's filled with trials and tribulations and questioning that I had about my capacity to be effective. But I muscled my way through that. And then there's a video on there of maybe a 12-minute video of the Renaissance of Cambell Soup Company, the Campbell story. And you'll see how we slogged our way through that too. This is not all sexy stuff. This is a forced march every day, and it's a grind. So you've got to be being yourself. You've got to find the work fulfilling, and I don't know any other way to do the heavy lifting that has to be done when you're in the public eye like that.
Great. Next, I have Cynthia. Cynthia, are you able to ask Doug your question?
Yes. Hi, Doug.
Hi.
Early and just recently, you had mentioned about there's a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to being a leader. And my question is what did you find helpful when facing challenges that assisted you with remaining your authentic self?
Oh, you know, I'm a student of leadership, and I can look, leadership, I would argue, is sacred ground. Okay. I really believe we're on sacred ground here. The people that work for us are counting on us. I mean, they're thinking about us when they go, they're thinking about the work they have to do when they go to bed. They're probably dreaming about it. They're waking up thinking, what have I got to do today? They're managing their families, and then they're grinding through the day. And then they think they've just about gotten it right. And then another email comes through that is messing with their reality every day. And as a leader, I feel like, God, I have to create a culture that honors them and that enables them to do the work. And so I think, look, this whole leadership journey is sacred ground. As such, I encourage people to think about leadership as a craft that's honed with intention. It works off a mastery model to me. You apprentice at it as you're a junior leader, you work at it, and then you watch and you learn and you study and you get better. And then ultimately you get good enough to be responsible for a bigger piece of the pie, a bigger part of the enterprise. And as you do that, I encourage people to study leaders that really speak to them. In my Entourage of Excellence, I showed you Mother Teresa. I studied Mother Teresa. I was fascinated by how this little diminutive woman who had no resources could be changing the world. I also studied Jack Welch, who was the leader of the 21st century. I mean, of the 20th century in the corporate world, given the rules of the game at that point in time. And I learned from Jack what worked for him and what might work for me. Bill George is somebody I studied, who we talked about earlier. And in my case, here's someone I would actually commend to President Biden right now if he was as a student of leadership. I would go to South Africa when South Africa moved forward beyond de Klerk and went to oh my gosh, I'm old now, my thought, but the leader who led them out of apartheid. Can't believe that. And at any rate, he took the entire country to higher ground. He brought everybody with him as the first Black leader of that culture. And he brought the whites and all the population with him. And when I studied his leadership practices, I thought, you know, he was honoring all people. He was able to help in the fullness of time deal with all the tough issues, but get the country to move to higher ground. And that had a profound influence on me at the time. So I would encourage you to be a student of leadership. Look at the people who are effective that you admire. Angelou is a good friend from PepsiCo. She lifted PepsiCo from a shareholder-focused enterprise to one that was focused on building a better world. She talked about doing performance with purpose. I learned from Indra. So I'd say study the world around you, and learn from leaders you admire, and begin to find ways to feather their practices and their values into the way you work in a way that works for you. You know, this leadership journey does not need to be a lonely pursuit. You know, they say it's lonely at the top. That's a bunch of hogwash. It's only lonely if you let it be. The world is filled with people who you can learn from, who actually want to be helpful to you, that you can trust. You just have to work at creating that kind of a network of people virtually and personally who can be on the journey with you. As Maya Angelou said, the rainbow's in her clouds. And I've had many rainbows in my clouds as well. So look for points of inspiration and people to learn from.
I think we have just a few more questions, if you don't mind. Next one is from Megan. It says, wondering if you can touch a little on leadership for small businesses, which means teams fewer than 10, where everyone wears multiple hats and there is no true quote unquote leader.
Look, I'm running a small business right now, Conant Leadership. We've got 1/5 of the staff on this call with me. And so I get that. I think there has to be, I think this is true of all businesses, but it's most true of small businesses. I think there has to be a clear sense of purpose for what you're trying to do. I think there has to be a sense of we're all in this together. The most successful businesses have had a great idea and have connected it in some way to a higher purpose and have done it in a way that honors that small team. And I think the most effective leaders in these environments tend to be leaders who lead by example. And because if you're the leader, you are the example. And people look to you to see if you're walking the talk. So you've got to figure out what the talk is. And I would encourage someone to think about honoring people, inspiring trust, creating a higher purpose, and then walking that talk every day with your colleagues. If you can't build credibility at a high level with a small group of people, in my opinion, you don't have much of a chance, unless you have a brilliant idea that will survive even with poor or marginal leadership. The only thing I could say, and I've seen lots of those too, the only thing I can say is you can do even better if you employ a purpose-driven approach that honors people. Those are my thoughts.
All right. Next one is from Jenna. She asks, what do you recommend as the best way to develop mid-level managers to be excellent leaders? I think there's mid-level managers. Look, you have most companies have a performance review system, which has characteristics that you're looking for from your managers. First of all, I would make sure that that's well thought out and that it connects to your mission and connects to the expectations the enterprise has of senior leaders. So I would make sure that our expectations are clear of our middle manager leaders and that they're getting feedback on those. That helps. But all that's doing, I'll go back to my Brene Brown quote, is telling them how they can walk inside of your story as a company, which is helpful. You have to be clear about your expectations. But the places that I see that really get traction are places where they also dial into the individual and they create room for the individual to develop their own perspective on what works for them and helps them marry those expectations with the expectations of the company so that that individual manager can have a more fulfilling journey. And in my experience, they tend to be with the company longer. So help them develop the skills necessary to operate within your enterprise, but also help them uncover the skills necessary
that are important to them that can help them have a more fulfilling journey in the enterprise. So that's what we do with the blueprint. What is attractive to the companies we work with is we're not trying to reinvent what that company is expecting of those leaders. We're trying to help that leader get more well anchored in who they are and how they can connect with the company expectations. It's almost like the Venn diagrams we had in school, where you have your expectations of the company, and you also have your expectations of what the expectations are of a leader. And in that case, I think companies need to pay attention to what the people are looking for, as well as what they're looking for from the people. That's going to be a bigger demand in the war for talent. You're going to have to meet the needs of the individual beyond just demanding that the individual meet the needs of the company.
All right, I think this is probably the last one. I'm sorry if I missed any, but as you took on, so this is from Eleni. As you took on more leadership roles, how did you balance driving the new big thing / disruptive change versus doing your role really well with incremental change? What do you feel was expected of you with regards to this balance?
This is not people aren't gonna like this answer, but you have to do both. I mean, you can't have any leaky buckets in an enterprise. If you just chase the shiny new object, which every company needs to be chasing, you run the risk of taking away attention and resources from the businesses that are paying the bills today. So, I mean, you gotta have double vision here. You gotta have a vision on maintaining the base while you're doing the incremental new things. So you gotta make sure you've got the right resources and the right mindset around maintaining the base, while at the same time, you're layering in new pieces. At Campbell, the Cambell Soup business, we were much more than soup. We were the world's largest soup manufacturer, but we were also the third largest cookie and cracker and baked snack manufacturer in the world. And we were also the leading vegetable and fruit juice manufacturer in the world. And with V8 and with things like Pepperidge Farm in the United States and baked snacks. And we pursued growth across everything, but we had to make sure the soup business was meeting expectations. If it didn't work, all the incremental innovative work wouldn't have been sufficient. So we had to bring innovation to the base, but we had to maintain it. And then we had to layer on innovation on top of it. So sadly, there's no silver bullet here. You got to take care of the base and you have to build the new. And you have to have an organization design that enables the enterprise to do both. You have to take care of the base and you have to innovate on the new. If we had more time, we could talk more about innovation, but quite frankly, we're out of time. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Sounds good.
By the way, the name I couldn't think of was Nelson Mandela. For the life of me, I don't know how I could forget Nelson Mandela.
It happens to everyone, right? So Doug, I'll pass it over to our Senior Program Director for Membership to close out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doug. You were incredible. I am in awe. I'm still in awe just listening to your presentation. I want to just say that you gave us so many great nuggets and takeaways today to think about. You took us to the leadership mountaintop today. You honestly did. For my church folks, I would say you took us to Leadership Church, but I'll say you took us to the mountaintop today, and I so appreciate that. A couple of things resonated with me personally. Living and leading with integrity. Wow. Yes, yes, and yes. And putting people first. Isn't that what it's really about? Really? So much of what you said truly resonated with me. I'm kind of the leadership person and love it. But we so appreciate your time, your expertise, all of your experience that you brought forward today. Very grateful for that. Wish you had more time because I know there will be more questions and more feedback and dialogue. But since you don't, we want to say thank you so much once again for your time and efforts today. And we applaud you.
Thank you.
As Bob mentioned in his opening remarks, we want to remind all of our members about our program that we have every year that's great, our State of the Economy with PNC President Lou Costello and Chief Economist Gus Fauché. That takes place on February 25th from 8:30 until 10 a.m. Don't forget, to all of our members who haven't renewed, we're looking for you to renew because we have a phenomenal year planned for you of 2021. Last but certainly not least, would like to thank all of our sponsors, because without you, we could not continue to put on our world-class educational programs and all the other events. I'd like to thank PNC Bank, Meyer, Unkevent and Scott LLP, UPMC Health Plan, AT&T, Cohen and Company, Wilkie and Associates LLP, Net Experts, C-Level, and last but certainly not least, Henderson Brothers. We thank all of you for attending today. Have a phenomenal day, and thank you for supporting the IEE. Take care.